Kicked out by her furious dad with nowhere to go, a single mom collapses on the street, until a passing millionaire CEO slams the brakes and changes her life in the most unexpected way. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The winter rain pounded mercilessly on the rusted roof of a small, dilapidated house at the edge of town. Inside, Clara held her sleeping daughter tight, the child's tiny body pressed against her chest as thunder rumbled in the distance. At only 6 years old, Sarah sensed her mother's distress even in her sleep. It had all happened so quickly. That same morning, Clara's father had summoned her to the living room, his voice cold and his eyes filled with a distant anger she had never seen before. "You have disgraced this family," he declared, slamming his hand against a table piled high with unpaid bills. "You can't take care of yourself, let alone a child. I've sacrificed for too long and now I want you out. Today." Clara's world had shattered in an instant. She had known her father's patience was wearing thin. Ever since her mother passed away, the old man had become increasingly bitter. But she never thought he would force her onto the streets with Sarah in tow. Begging him for compassion, she clutched the only picture she had of her late mother, tears sliding down her cheeks. It was useless. Her father merely pointed to a battered suitcase already packed with what little clothing she owned and grunted for her to take Sarah and leave. With nowhere to turn and no money in her pockets, Clara found herself wandering the soggy sidewalks under the unforgiving rain. Every droplet that soaked her clothes seemed to carry a reminder of her father's final words. "Don't come back." Sarah shivered despite the blanket that Clara used to shield her from the wind. The city lights flickered in the distance, offering no real warmth or hope. She spent the afternoon looking for a shelter or a church that might give them a place to stay. Door after door closed in her face. Funds were limited, or the rooms had reached capacity. Well-meaning volunteers gave her sympathetic smiles but no real solutions. By dusk, the storm had intensified, and Sarah cried in hunger. Clara's heart ached. She was a mother without a home, turned away by the only family she had left. What Clara didn't know was that this terrible day would mark a turning point she could never have predicted. Fate, or perhaps something greater, was already weaving a different destiny for her and her daughter. And it would begin with a single act of kindness from a stranger she was yet to meet. Inside the crowded bus station, Clara tried to comfort Sarah by buying the cheapest warm drink she could afford, a cup of watery hot cocoa from a vending machine that almost swallowed the last coin she had. The hustle of travelers moving in every direction disoriented her. Suitcases rattled along the floor, announcements blared overhead, and neon lights buzzed faintly. Clara sat on a cracked plastic bench, hugging her daughter, not knowing where to go next. That's when she noticed a commotion. A tall, well-dressed man rushing by, phone pressed to his ear, voice firm but seemingly controlled. Everything about him radiated importance, from the impeccable cut of his charcoal suit to the polished shoes that seemed out of place in this grimy setting. And though he appeared to be in a hurry, his gaze unexpectedly fell upon Clara and Sarah. Something in the desolate sight of the mother and child must have tugged at his conscience because he paused mid-sentence, eyes narrowing with concern. In that fleeting moment, Clara was too exhausted to care who noticed her. She turned her attention back to Sarah, adjusting the child's damp curls and wiping stray tears from her cheek. Moments later, she heard footsteps approaching and a gentle voice. "Miss, are you all right?" Clara looked up into the face of a stranger. The man's expression was soft yet focused, as though he were searching for some explanation. Embarrassed and wary, she glanced away, hugging Sarah even closer. Growing up, she had been told over and over never to trust strangers, especially not when you're as vulnerable as she was right now. But there was a sincerity in his eyes that dissolved some of her fear. We just need a place for the night," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. She didn't want to beg, but desperation overtook pride. My daughter is cold. I've asked at every shelter, but they're full. The man was silent for a second, as if taking in the entire tragedy with one sweeping glance. Don't worry, he said gently, slipping his phone into his pocket. I might be able to help. And help he did. He motioned for Clara to stand. She followed him outside, Sarah in her arms. Parked by the curb was a sleek black car, so out of place amidst the damp cardboard boxes and scattered litter. He opened the door for them, letting Clara sit with Sarah before speaking softly to the driver. Then he got in on the other side, casting them an occasional reassuring look as if to say, "You're safe with me." The ride felt surreal to Clara. She kept expecting him to reveal some nefarious intention, but instead of questions about her personal life or snide remarks about her ragged appearance, the stranger kept his distance, allowing mother and daughter some room to breathe. Street lamps blurred past the windows, the hum of the engine lulling Sarah toward sleep. When the car finally stopped, Clara found herself in front of an elegant building, modern architecture with a clean, minimalist facade. Everything looked impossibly expensive. The doorman, dressed in a sharp uniform, greeted the man respectfully. So he wasn't just wealthy, he was obviously someone of influence around here. Clara felt a wave of panic rise in her chest. Why was he doing this? What if he expected something in return? She tried to steady her breathing, reminding herself that so far he had shown only kindness. The man led them through a brightly lit lobby adorned with fresh flowers and marble floors that glistened under chandeliers. An elevator took them up to a private suite. Inside, the apartment seemed vast yet tastefully furnished. Warm-toned wood floors, large windows revealing the city lights, plush couches that beckoned rest. The contrast with everything Clara had ever known was staggering. She hesitated at the threshold, uncertain if she should even step onto such pristine flooring with her muddy shoes. "Please, come in," he insisted. "My name is Alexander, by the way." "Clara," she managed, voice still shaky. "And this is my daughter, Sarah." Alexander motioned them to the living area, and almost on cue, a discreet housekeeper appeared with 2 soft towels and a child-sized blanket. The kindness made Clara's eyes brim with tears she tried to hide. She had known only scorn and rejection all day. Now, here was a gentle face, a warm space, and a promise, unspoken but implied, that everything would be all right. While Sarah curled up on a large armchair, drifting into an exhausted sleep, Alexander quietly offered Clara a seat on a comfortable sofa. He spoke in a measured tone, carefully choosing words that wouldn't add to her distress. "I can see you've had a rough time. Stay here tonight, get some rest. We'll talk in the morning when we're all less tired." The sensation of relief was so overwhelming that Clara sobbed into her hands, shoulders trembling under the weight of her gratitude and lingering fear. She had no idea who this man really was, what he did, or why he had chosen to help her. But for the moment, she believed he was sincere. She felt safe under this stranger's roof for a single night, at least. Little did she know that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. Because Alexander was more than just a wealthy benefactor. He was one of the most influential CEOs in the city, with resources and secrets that could shape Clara's future entirely. And as the night wore on, the city lights flickering through the windows seemed to whisper the start of a new chapter in their lives. Clara woke up to the soft rays of morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back, her father's anger, her desperate search for shelter, and finally the kindness of a total stranger. She pushed herself upright, her muscles stiff from stress and fatigue, and looked around. Instead of the cramped, musty corners she had grown used to, she saw polished hardwood floors, elegant furniture, and an air of calm she could hardly believe was real. Her daughter Sarah still slept soundly on a velvet armchair, curled beneath a fluffy blanket. Clara rose quietly, reaching out to stroke the child's hair. Even through the chaos, Sarah's face held a certain peace, as if convinced that everything would turn out all right. Clara's heart constricted with love and guilt. She wished she could promise her daughter a life without more storms, both literal and metaphorical. Still dressed in the same clothes from yesterday, Clara felt a wave of self-consciousness. She glanced at the reflection in a large window, noticing her tangled hair, the faint circles under her eyes. Before she could dwell on her appearance, however, she heard soft footsteps. Turning around, she saw Alexander entering the living room, carrying 2 cups of steaming tea. "Good morning," he greeted, voice quiet so as not to wake Sarah. He wore a crisp shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows in a gesture of casualness that contrasted with the formality of his surroundings. He offered Clara one of the cups. "Chamomile. I thought you might want something warm. I wasn't sure what you like." She accepted the tea with trembling hands, aware that she must look entirely out of place in his immaculate penthouse. "Thank you," she murmured, "for the tea and for everything else." Alexander regarded her thoughtfully. "How did you sleep?" he asked. His question carried no edge, no pity, just genuine concern. Clara appreciated that more than she could say. She took a sip, savoring the gentle warmth. "Better than I have in a while," she answered honestly, though the mental weight of her predicament remained. "But I don't want to overstay my welcome. We'll find somewhere else today." Alexander shook his head, a slight frown forming on his face. "There's no rush," he replied, settling on a sofa across from her. "I'd like to help you if you'll let me." Clara studied him, unsure how to react. She'd always prided herself on managing somehow, stitching torn hems for neighbors, taking on part-time cleaning jobs, scraping by with the littlest bit of dignity she could muster. Accepting help from a wealthy CEO felt like stepping into a different universe altogether. "Help me," she echoed, cautious. "You don't even know me." He gave a small, reassuring smile. "I know enough. I saw a mother in need of protection. I remember being a child who once needed help, too, though for different reasons. But please understand," he added gently, "I'm not forcing anything upon you. If you want to leave, no one will stop you, but consider staying at least until you've had some time to plan." Her breath caught. Relief clashed with old teachings of never trusting too easily. She set her teacup down on the coffee table. "It's just, I have nowhere else to go," she admitted, looking down at her hands. Then she looked over at Sarah, who stirred slightly in her sleep, hugging the plush blanket to her chest. Alexander nodded. "Stay a few days, get your footing. We'll figure something out, together." The sincerity in his tone melted a fraction more of Clara's defenses. Before she could respond, Sarah awakened with a soft yawn, peeking over the blanket. "Mommy?" she asked, still half dreaming. Then she spotted Alexander and froze, wide-eyed at the sight of the tall man in a penthouse that felt more like a dream than reality. Clara stood and scooped her daughter up in a tight hug. "Good morning, sweetheart. How do you feel?" Sarah blinked sleep from her eyes. "It's so pretty here. Are we safe?" "We're safe," Clara assured her, biting her lip to hold back tears that threatened to surface. She was determined not to cry in front of Sarah. "And we're going to stay here for a little while, okay?" Sarah gave a timid nod, turning curious eyes toward Alexander. He caught her gaze and smiled. "Hi, Sarah," he said softly. "I'm Alex. How about some breakfast?" The child nodded shyly, and a housekeeper immediately entered the living room as if on cue, announcing that there was a small breakfast spread arranged on the kitchen island. Unsure how else to respond, Clara followed Alexander's invitation. All her life she had made do with the simplest meals. Seeing an array of fresh fruit, warm bread, eggs, and even little pastries made her feel both gratitude and an unsettling sense of displacement. She was living in someone else's world, a world she'd seen only in magazines or on television. While Sarah devoured a croissant, Clara hovered awkwardly, not quite knowing if she should sit or wait for permission. Alexander handed her a plate. "Please help yourself," he urged. "I don't usually eat a big breakfast, but my staff always prepares enough for an army. It's a habit from my early days, and kids especially seem to enjoy it." Clara forced a tiny smile, realizing for the first time just how hungry she was. Her stomach rumbled in agreement. She took a piece of toast and some fruit, feeling tears prick at her eyes again because it had been so long since she'd sat down to a real meal. Sarah, noticing her mother's expression, slipped a small hand into Clara's. The gesture said everything. "We're together, and right now that's enough." They ate in a quiet hush, the only sound the clink of utensils against porcelain. The view from the windows dazzled them, a skyline dotted with towering buildings, the morning sun reflecting off glass and steel. Clara felt a pang in her chest, wondering if she'd ever be able to afford such a view herself. After breakfast, Alexander cleared his throat. "I have a meeting this morning," he began, "and I can't cancel it, but I want you and Sarah to be comfortable here." He stepped over to a small desk, scribbled some notes, then extended a business card. "This is my contact information. My assistant's number is on the back. If you need anything, medicine, groceries, or just want to reach me, call her. She can handle it. Or call me directly." Clara took the card as though it were made of fragile crystal. "Thank you," she said. "But we won't use it," he interrupted gently, looking at her with an intensity that almost made her flinch. "Please, there's no shame in needing help. And if you're uncomfortable at any point or want to go somewhere else, let me know, and I'll arrange a safe alternative. Deal?" She exhaled slowly, gratitude and a hint of fear mixing in her chest. "All right, deal." Before leaving, Alexander also mentioned he would send up some basic clothes for Clara and Sarah, since he noticed they came with almost nothing. Clara bristled. Her pride stung at the reminder of her own helplessness. But the idea of Sarah having a fresh change of clothes that actually fit properly overrode any sense of shame. Alexander left soon after, giving Sarah a gentle wave. The little girl waved back, still chewing on her last bite of croissant. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving mother and daughter enveloped in a silence so luxurious it felt almost unreal. Clara turned to Sarah with a trembling smile. "Look at us," she whispered, sinking onto a plush chair. "Yesterday we were on the streets, and now this." Sarah, in the sweet, forthright manner only a child can manage, asked, "Is he an angel?" Clara laughed, though tears brimmed in her eyes once more. "Not an angel, just someone very kind." She paused, looking around. "Or maybe an angel in disguise. I really don't know." They spent the rest of the morning exploring the large apartment carefully, as if afraid to break something. In one hallway, they found a wall decorated with framed newspaper clippings and awards, Alexander's achievements, presumably. CEO of an international tech firm, philanthropic honors, recognition from civic organizations. Clara read bits of the articles with quiet amazement, learning that Alexander had grown up in a humble background before creating a startup that skyrocketed to success. He was known not only for his wealth but for his philanthropic projects, especially those aimed at helping underprivileged youth. Underprivileged youth, she repeated softly, staring at one of the articles. She'd always felt like a statistic in a city that offered few second chances. Yet here she was, protected in the home of the very person who had the power to make large-scale change for people like her. Sarah tugged on her sleeve, drawing her attention to a large photo taken at some charity event. Alexander stood in the center, surrounded by smiling children. "He seems so happy," Sarah observed. Clara nodded. "Yes, he does." She suddenly realized that if she had met Alexander on any other day, perhaps at a normal job interview or by random chance in the supermarket, she might have found him intimidating. But seeing him in these pictures, with these kids, reminded her of the gentleness in his eyes the night before. They turned away from the display and wandered back to the living area. A knock sounded at the door, making Clara's heart jump. She approached it slowly, peering through a small peephole. An unfamiliar woman stood in the hallway, holding several shopping bags and wearing a polite smile. Clara opened the door a crack. "Good morning," the woman said, stepping back respectfully. "I'm Mr. Alexander's personal shopper. He asked me to deliver these items for you and your daughter. May I come in?" Feeling both embarrassed and deeply grateful, Clara let her in. The woman introduced herself as Irene and began laying out items, dresses and casual clothes in sizes that clearly matched Sarah, comfortable outfits for Clara, a few pairs of shoes. They were modest but new, things that whispered of a life Clara had never had the resources to explore. "I'm not sure. This is too much," Clara managed, voice cracking. "I can't possibly—" Irene placed a gentle hand on Clara's arm. "I understand. Mr. Alexander insisted. If there's anything you don't like, you can return it. But please, don't feel embarrassed. He just wants you to be comfortable." Clara could only nod. Overwhelmed, she sank onto the couch while Irene arranged the items. Sarah squealed softly, drawn to a pair of shiny pink sneakers that perfectly fit her feet. Seeing her daughter's delight, Clara felt warmth flood her chest. She would endure any discomfort if it meant Sarah was happy and cared for. Once Irene left, mother and daughter found themselves alone in the vast apartment again, now with a small wardrobe of brand new clothes. Clara inhaled deeply. She couldn't let herself get too comfortable, not when she had no idea what the future held. Would Alexander come to regret his generosity? Would her father's words echo back, telling her she wasn't worthy of such kindness? As the sun reached its zenith, Clara thought of Alexander in his high-powered meetings, negotiating contracts or addressing staff. How strange that such a man, with so much on his plate, took the time to shelter her and Sarah. What was his angle, if any? Anxiety gnawed at her, but so did an odd sense of hope. Maybe this was an open door, not just for a roof over their heads, but for a life where she wouldn't have to constantly look over her shoulder, waiting for the next eviction or condemnation. She wasn't naive enough to believe that everything would be perfect, but maybe, just maybe, they had found a turning point. Outside, the rain had subsided into a drizzle that sparkled in the afternoon light. The city's skyline gleamed like a promise. Clara wrapped Sarah in a hug, marveling at how fate could twist itself in a single day. Then, gathering her courage, she decided she would not only accept Alexander's help but also find a way to repay his kindness. Because above all else, Clara was determined to prove, to him and to herself, that she was more than just a burden. Afternoon light poured through the penthouse windows, illuminating the quiet corners where Clara and Sarah tried on their new clothes. Every so often, Clara would step into the hallway to admire the way a simple blouse fit, or how a pair of jeans hugged her waist. Nothing flashy, but of a quality she had never been able to afford. Sarah twirled around in her pink sneakers, the delight evident on her face. They shared shy giggles, as if embarrassed to be enjoying these comforts so much. Yet beneath the laughter, Clara felt apprehension. She couldn't quite forget that this was all happening in a man's home, a man she hardly knew, a man who to outsiders might appear to be her savior. Was she just waiting for the inevitable day when kindness would turn to pity or suspicion? In mid-thought, her phone buzzed. It was a new, modest smartphone Alexander had left for her on the kitchen counter, preloaded with credit so she could contact him or make calls if needed. A text message appeared. Checking in. Everything all right? She stared at the words, her heart warming. He was at work, but still remembering to see if she was okay. Slowly, she typed a response. Yes, thank you. We're fine. Then she added a simple smiley face, feeling almost childish about it. Sarah, noticing her mother's nervous flutter, peeked at the screen and grinned. Is it Mr. Alex? She asked, voice soft with curiosity. Clara nodded. He's just making sure we have everything we need. Sarah bounced on her toes. He's nice. He is, Clara agreed, though 1,000 questions about him danced in her mind. By late afternoon, Clara decided she couldn't spend another hour simply waiting in that pristine penthouse. She took a deep breath, donned her new shoes, and summoned the courage to venture outside. The doorman greeted her politely, clearly informed by Alexander about her presence. Clara asked for the nearest grocery store. She didn't have much money, but she could at least buy a few basics and try to cook dinner. She reasoned it was the smallest gesture she could offer Alexander in return. Stepping onto the busy city streets, she felt a jolt. Everything looked different from this upscale neighborhood. Boutiques, glossy storefronts, manicured sidewalks. She felt a pang of homesickness for her old neighborhood, despite its run-down corners. At least there she had known every crack in the pavement. She found a small supermarket tucked behind a modern office tower. Sarah clung to her hand as they navigated the aisles, still a bit intimidated by their new surroundings. Clara picked out fresh vegetables, some chicken, rice, simple ingredients to make a hearty meal. Her father had never bothered teaching her much, but her mother had shown her a few recipes before she passed away. If nothing else, she could prepare something warm and filling. Approaching the cash register, Clara braced herself for the total. She'd discovered a small envelope of cash in the kitchen labeled, "For groceries," with a note in Alexander's neat handwriting, "Use whatever you need." She hesitated, feeling a twinge of guilt, but resolved to reimburse him once she found a job. For now, she placed the items on the conveyor belt. The cashier rang everything up, and to her relief, the total was manageable. As Clara gathered the bags, she heard hushed murmurs from a couple of bystanders who recognized her from the building or from fleeting glances in the elevator. They whispered, "Isn't that the woman with Mr. Donovan? He never brings women home. She's got a child with her." Clara pretended not to hear, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. She had no idea how much attention was on Alexander, or how widely people knew him. Word traveled fast in elite circles, it seemed. Clara practically power-walked back to the apartment building, ignoring any curious stares. In the elevator, Sarah asked innocently, "Mommy, why are people looking at us like that?" "It's nothing, baby," Clara soothed, though she fought to steady her breath. "They're just not used to seeing us." Back inside the penthouse, she relaxed a fraction. She set Sarah up with a coloring book on the coffee table, one of the child-friendly items someone on Alexander's staff had left earlier, then moved to the spotless kitchen. After a quick assessment of the appliances, she began chopping vegetables, marinating the chicken, and rinsing the rice. She found herself smiling at how smoothly the stove lit, how the pot didn't wobble on a broken burner like it did at her father's place. It seemed like a small miracle. Every so often she glimpsed the city skyline from the huge window. The sun was sinking, painting the sky with hues of lavender and gold. She wondered if Alexander would come home soon or if he'd be delayed by countless meetings. The more she thought about it, the more she realized she knew almost nothing about his world. Billion-dollar deals, corporate expansions, philanthropic galas. She was a seamstress's daughter who used to fix neighbors' dresses and scrub floors in offices while he was giving speeches to entire boards of directors. Yet when they spoke, none of that had seemed to matter. He'd looked at her with genuine empathy. Clara hoped his kindness was more than a facade. She had heard so many stories about powerful men who used their wealth to manipulate, but that wasn't Alexander's vibe, or at least she didn't think so. The aroma of the simmering stew soon filled the penthouse, making her realize just how hungry she was. Sarah approached, sniffing the air excitedly. "That smells yummy," she declared, bright-eyed. Clara grinned and gave her daughter a little taste on a spoon. Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "So good, Mommy." Just as Clara was setting the table, unsure if she should use the fancy plates or the simpler ones, a key turned in the lock. Alexander walked in, looking slightly tired but still poised. He paused, clearly surprised by the warmth and scent of a home-cooked meal. "Wow," he said, loosening his tie. "Something smells amazing." Clara blushed, suddenly aware of how domestic she must look in that sleek kitchen, wearing a borrowed apron she'd found in a drawer. I hope it's okay that I cooked," she said quickly, fiddling with the edge of the apron. "I just wanted to do something useful." He smiled. "It's more than okay. It's the best welcome I've had in ages." Then he spotted Sarah, who scampered over to greet him. "And hello to you," he added, dropping to her level and high-fiving the little girl with a playful grin. It was a simple moment, yet it felt monumental to Clara. She gestured hesitantly. "I just made stew with rice. Nothing fancy." Alexander laughed softly. "Trust me, my usual dinners are either catered or eaten on the go. Home-cooked stew sounds like a feast. Shall we eat?" They settled at the table, Sarah taking a seat between them. Clara dished out steaming bowls, her nerves fluttering when Alexander took his first bite. She waited breathlessly. His eyes lit up. "This is excellent," he declared, not merely being polite. She could see genuine enjoyment on his face. Relief washed over her, and she finally relaxed enough to taste her own dish. The flavors popped on her tongue. She'd done well, perhaps motivated by gratitude, or maybe by the desire to show she wasn't just another person looking for a handout, but someone who could contribute, even if only in a small way. As they ate, Alexander asked politely about her day, curious if she'd found everything she needed, if Sarah was comfortable. Clara answered in short, honest bursts, describing their trip to the store, the looks from strangers, her desire to find some stability. She left out the pang of shame she felt at using his money. He seemed to sense her discomfort anyway. "Don't worry about paying me back for groceries," Alexander said gently. "Just focus on settling in." "I'm not used to all this," she admitted, gesturing vaguely at the luxurious setting. "I want to eventually stand on my own feet. I don't want you to think I'm freeloading." He placed his spoon down, looking at her intently. "I understand. I respect that. Believe me, the last thing I assume is that you're freeloading. You're a mother who got dealt a bad hand by someone who should have protected you. That's not your fault." His words touched her deeply, bringing back the image of her father slamming doors, telling her to leave with Sarah. She blinked back tears and forced a small smile. "Thank you." Over dessert, just some fruit salad Clara had improvised, Alexander casually mentioned an idea. "If you're looking for a job, maybe I can help. My company is always in need of various roles. Or if that doesn't suit you, I know people in other organizations who might be looking for honest, hard-working staff." Clara hesitated, feeling her cheeks burn again. Yes, I'd love to work," she managed. "I used to clean offices, do small sewing jobs for neighbors. I'm not sure if your company would need someone like me." "Don't underestimate yourself," he said, finishing the last bite of fruit. "We have a corporate wardrobe department, uniforms, promotional apparel, stuff like that. They might need an assistant who can sew and fix garments, among other tasks. I can inquire if you'd like." Her heart fluttered. Sewing was one skill she'd learned by necessity, and she actually enjoyed it. "That would be amazing," she replied, hardly daring to hope. "If it's not too much trouble." "It's no trouble," he said lightly, though his gaze was serious. "Let me talk to the department head, see if there's an opening that fits your schedule. You'd need flexibility because of Sarah, but we could figure something out." Sarah, who'd been busy doodling on a small notepad near her plate, piped up at the mention of her name. "Mommy can sew anything," she declared proudly. "She fixed all my clothes when they got holes." Alexander laughed. "You see, your biggest fan is right here." Clara nodded, smiling at her daughter. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she sensed a real path forming, a way to move forward instead of just surviving day by day. She also felt a grateful heaviness in her chest, aware that Alexander's generosity was opening doors that had seemed forever locked. Could it be this simple, or was life about to throw another curve? They cleared the table together, despite Clara insisting she could handle it alone. While washing dishes, she noticed Alexander glancing around the kitchen as if he were genuinely delighted to see it in use. He caught her looking and shrugged. "I've always wanted this space to feel more like a home, not just a showpiece. I guess I haven't had a reason until now." She paused, setting a wet dish aside. The significance of his confession wasn't lost on her. Before she could respond, Sarah ran in, tugging at Clara's sleeve, eyes drooping. "Mommy, I'm sleepy," she mumbled. The day's excitement had clearly worn her out. Alexander quickly offered to set up the guest bedroom more comfortably for Sarah. He led them to a cozy room with a soft bed, plush pillows, and walls painted in gentle pastel. It was large enough for an adult, so Clara initially hesitated to let her daughter have it. "We can share," she said. "We'll sleep together if that's okay." Alexander nodded. "Of course. I'll bring extra blankets. Make yourselves at home." After tucking Sarah in, Clara sat at the edge of the bed, the hush of evening wrapping around them. She thanked Alexander for everything, for the day's help, for the prospective job, for trusting her enough to let her stay longer. He shrugged off her gratitude in that humble way of his and bade them good night. Left alone with Sarah sleeping, Clara's mind whirled. She listened to the steady hum of the city outside. It was astonishing how quickly her life had shifted, from being homeless in the cold to lying in a snug bed in a penthouse. She reached out to smooth her daughter's hair, fighting the urge to cry in both relief and trepidation. Yet for all her worries, there was a spark of hope she couldn't ignore. Tomorrow, she would see about that job. She would wake up in a warm place, feed Sarah, and maybe start rebuilding her life from scratch. And as she closed her eyes, drifting into a sleep that came more easily than expected, she silently thanked whatever twist of fate had led her to meet Alexander Donovan. Morning filtered through the blinds in pale slats of light. Clara awoke to the soft sound of Sarah's breathing and, for a fleeting moment, forgot where she was. Then the pastel walls and plush bedding reminded her they were in Alexander's guest room, not the cramped apartment where she'd once shared space with her father's bitterness. Carefully sliding off the bed, Clara left Sarah asleep and tiptoed into the hallway. The penthouse was quiet. She assumed Alexander might already have left for the office. He seemed the type to start his day early, with schedules full of meetings and calls. Still, she felt a stirring of anticipation. He had promised to ask about a potential sewing job at his company. She planned to repay his kindness by working as hard as she could, desperate to prove she was more than a charity case. She crept into the kitchen and was surprised to find a tray on the island with a note. "Good morning, Clara. I left some pastries and fresh juice for you and Sarah. I'll be back this afternoon to talk about the job. Please make yourselves at home. A." Clara's heart lifted at the sight. She found it surprisingly easy to picture Alexander here, preparing a simple breakfast, maybe noticing how everything was still and silent in the early morning. She whispered a small "thank you," although he wasn't around to hear. Pouring herself a glass of juice, she set out 2 plates for when Sarah woke up. The day was wide open, offering no pressing tasks except to care for her daughter and think about her next steps. How long could they stay with Alexander? Was there a deadline, an expiration date on his hospitality? She was lost in thought when Sarah padded into the kitchen, yawning. "Mommy, I'm hungry," the little girl said. Clara immediately pulled her into a hug and offered her one of the pastries. Sarah bit into it with gusto, giving a sweet, crumb-filled grin. As Sarah ate, Clara considered what to do for the rest of the morning. Perhaps she could tidy up the apartment, though it was already immaculate. Or she could find a sewing kit and repair any small tears or loose buttons on Alexander's things. She felt uneasy, just sitting around, as if every moment of rest might be perceived as laziness. Yet even as she pondered these options, she reminded herself that part of Alexander's generosity was to allow her a chance to breathe. Maybe for once she could simply enjoy the lull. Sarah was safe. A potential job was on the horizon. That should be enough for now. She ended up wandering the penthouse's main living area, taking in the wall art and the expansive windows that overlooked the city. Eventually, she found a door that led to a small, cozy study filled with shelves of books, business manuals, biographies of world leaders, and some classic literature scattered between. She noticed worn spines of novels she recognized from her childhood. It made her smile, imagining Alexander curled up in a leather chair, reading something far from his corporate world. While examining a row of old family photos on a side table, Clara stopped short at one in particular. It was Alexander, much younger, standing beside an older man and woman, presumably his parents. In the image, his clothes were simple, even a bit outdated, and he had the same gentle expression in his eyes. She wondered what had propelled him from that modest life to a penthouse in the sky. A quiet beep from the intercom startled her. Approaching the device near the kitchen, she pressed a small button. A woman's voice came through. "Good morning, Ms. Clara. I'm Lily, Mr. Donovan's assistant. May I come up?" Clara hesitated briefly. "Yes, of course." Moments later, Lily arrived at the front door, a poised woman dressed smartly in professional attire. Her smile was warm but businesslike. "Good morning. I hope I'm not disturbing you," she said, holding a folder against her side. "Not at all," Clara replied, motioning for her to enter. "Is everything okay?" Lily nodded. "Yes. Mr. Donovan asked me to bring some paperwork for you. Information about the uniform department at the company. He mentioned you might be interested in a position there." The words sent a thrill of excitement through Clara. "Yes, I am. Thank you." They settled at the kitchen island. Lily opened the folder, revealing neatly arranged documents. She spoke in a calm, efficient manner. "So the department regularly needs part-time support with stitching, alterations, and general garment upkeep. It's not a formal design position, but you'd be handling basic repairs and prep work for uniforms and apparel. If you're comfortable, we can set you up to meet the manager, Mrs. Hastings, for an informal interview." Clara peered at the job description. It looked straightforward, exactly the sort of hands-on sewing tasks she knew how to do, plus flexible hours. That was crucial for caring for Sarah. "Yes, that'd be wonderful," she said, looking up. "When would the meeting be?" Lily consulted her tablet. "Mrs. Hastings is free tomorrow morning at 10. Would that work for you? Mr. Donovan can have a car take you there if you prefer." Clara smiled, though she bristled slightly at the idea of always relying on a chauffeur. "Tomorrow is fine and, I might just take the bus. I'm used to it. But thank you for the offer." Lily returned the smile. "No problem. I'll confirm with Mrs. Hastings and send you the address. If you change your mind about the car, just let me know." They went through the rest of the documents: pay rate, schedules, and some general info about the company's policies. Clara's head spun a bit. She'd never been part of such a well-organized operation. Everything seemed meticulously planned. Before leaving, Lily gave Clara a measured look. "Mr. Donovan truly wants to help," she said. "He doesn't expect anything in return except that you do your best. I hope you feel comfortable about that." Clara's cheeks warmed. "I do. It's just new for me." Lily nodded understandingly, as though aware of the complexities behind Clara's situation. "It's new for all of us, in a way," she replied kindly. "Mr. Donovan, well, let's just say he usually keeps strict boundaries between work and his personal life. But you and Sarah are different." With that, Lily took her leave, and Clara was left standing at the kitchen island, the job documents in her hands. "Different," she mused. She wondered if Alexander was simply trying to be a good Samaritan, or if something about her and Sarah had stirred memories from his own past. The result was the same: an unexpected lifeline. That evening, when Alexander returned, he found Clara and Sarah in the living room, where Sarah was busily coloring while Clara reviewed some sewing project ideas on her phone. The moment he walked in, Sarah bounded toward him, proudly showing off a picture she'd drawn. A tall figure, Alexander, next to a smaller figure, Clara, and an even smaller one, Sarah, all holding hands beneath a blue sky. Alexander's expression softened. "Is this me?" he asked, pointing to the tallest doodle. Sarah giggled. "Yes, Mommy says you helped us like a hero." Clara blushed at her daughter's bluntness. "She's just being sweet," Clara said quickly, turning to Alexander. "Lily came by today. She gave me the info about the sewing job. The interview is tomorrow." A smile lit Alexander's features. "That's great. I'm glad we could arrange it so quickly. Are you feeling ready?" She exhaled, placing the papers aside. "Nervous, but hopeful. I want to do well. I want to to show that I can contribute." "You don't have to prove anything to me," Alexander assured, his voice gentle. "But I understand wanting to do your best. If you need anything, let me know." Then, almost shyly, he held out a small stuffed bear dressed in a tiny business suit. I picked this up for Sarah on the way home. Saw it in a gift shop and couldn't resist." Sarah's eyes lit up and she clutched the bear, squealing with delight. "Thank you." She ran off to show her new plush toy to her makeshift doll collection. Clara's heart squeezed with gratitude, again aware of how many gestures of kindness Alexander had extended in such a short time. "Thank you," Clara echoed softly when Sarah was out of earshot. "She adores you, you know." He smiled, though he looked almost bashful. "She's an easy child to adore." They chatted about the day. Alexander had worked on finalizing a deal for a charitable foundation, while Clara described Lily's visit and how Sarah spent the afternoon coloring. Clara offered to cook dinner again, a gesture that Alexander didn't protest. In fact, he seemed genuinely happy about it. While they prepared a simple pasta dish together, there was an unexpected but comfortable ease in their interactions, like two people settling into a rhythm. She asked about his foundation plans, and he explained briefly, carefully choosing words so as not to bore her with corporate jargon. She listened intently, intrigued by how he married profit with purpose. It gave her a window into his world, one that was far more layered than just rich CEO. In between stirring the sauce, she couldn't resist a question that had been nagging at her. "Why do you do so much charity work? It's great, but it's not just for publicity, is it?" He paused, hand resting on a wooden spoon. "I grew up poor, in a neighborhood not unlike yours, I suspect. My father worked 2 jobs. My mother sewed clothes for neighbors. There were times we barely had enough for rent." He glanced at her, voice lowering. "I made a promise to myself. If I ever found success, I'd make sure to give back to families like mine. People who, through no fault of their own, found themselves cornered by life's cruelty." Clara's chest tightened. She recognized that sincerity, felt it resonate with her own struggles. No wonder he hadn't hesitated to help her. "It sounds like you're keeping that promise," she said gently, returning her attention to the simmering pot. "Thank you for including me and Sarah in that." He didn't respond immediately, but when he did, his tone held a quiet intensity. "It's not just about honoring a promise. It's also, well, you both matter. That's all." They finished cooking in thoughtful silence. Later, at the dinner table, Sarah chatted away about her coloring projects, and Alexander asked engaging questions, listening as if her crayon adventures were the most important news of the day. Clara watched the scene unfold with a mixture of wonder and a bit of caution. She was grateful, but every now and then she'd hear her father's harsh voice in the back of her mind, telling her that nobody ever helps for free, that there's always a catch. Yet Alexander's kindness felt genuine. Even if he was wealthy and powerful, he didn't flaunt it in a way that made her feel lesser. Rather, he seemed determined to use his advantages to uplift others. After dinner, while Sarah lay on the couch reading a children's book, another thoughtful gift that had appeared that afternoon, Clara accompanied Alexander to the kitchen to clean up. She hesitated before speaking. "I'm sorry if I'm overstepping, but I wanted to ask, my father, He used to say a lot of cruel things, that we weren't worth the effort, that charity never comes without a price. I'm trying to unlearn that, but it's hard. Sometimes I feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Alexander shut off the faucet, shaking water from his hands. He turned to face her, compassion in his gaze. No price, Clara. I promise you. Your father's words aren't mine. He took a breath. I won't pretend this is how I usually live my life, inviting someone to stay like this, but it felt right. You and Sarah needed help. I had the means to provide it. End of story. His directness eased some of her anxieties. She nodded, swallowing a lump of emotion. Thank you. She kept repeating those words, aware they might never feel sufficient, but hoping they conveyed at least a fraction of her gratitude. That night, as Sarah slept peacefully in the guest bed, Clara lay awake, mind spinning with thoughts of the upcoming interview. She pictured how she'd present herself, what she'd say to Mrs. Hastings, how she'd channel every scrap of confidence she could muster. Before drifting off, she listened to the city's subdued hum and realized she felt more at peace than she had in years. By dawn, she was up and preparing for her day. She'd chosen a simple blouse and slacks from the new clothes Alexander's personal shopper had brought, ensuring she looked neat yet comfortable enough to focus on the sewing tasks. After showering and braiding her hair in a tight plait, she ate a quick breakfast with Sarah, who was still drowsy and cartoon-fixated, then checked the bus schedule on her phone. Alexander had already left a note saying he hoped the interview went well and that he'd see her later. She took one last look around the penthouse, heart pounding with anticipation, then hugged Sarah and hurried out the door. A neighbor in the hallway smiled politely. The doorman gave her a respectful nod. She stepped onto the street feeling oddly like she belonged there, at least for the moment. Outside, the morning air held a crisp freshness that matched her sense of hope. Clutching a small tote containing her basic sewing supplies, just in case, she navigated the bus routes. Her father had once called this city a devouring beast, but today it felt like a place of possibility. As the bus rumbled through the crowded streets, Clara rehearsed potential interview answers in her mind. She also recalled the unwavering kindness she'd experienced here in the last few days. That thought alone gave her courage. She was doing this not only to support her daughter, but also to honor the trust Alexander had placed in her. For once, she felt like someone believed in her fully, and she was determined not to let him down. Clara stepped off the bus in front of a towering glass building with the company's name etched elegantly above the entrance. Even from the outside, it radiated a sense of bustling energy. Crisp suits hurried in and out, phones pressed to their ears, badges swinging from lanyards. She swallowed hard, nerves kicking up a notch. Despite her carefully pressed blouse and slacks, she couldn't help feeling out of place. But she reminded herself of the night before, Alexander's calm reassurance, his promise that she had nothing to prove to him, only to herself. Taking a steadying breath, she walked through the automatic doors, greeted by the rush of cool, climate-controlled air and polished marble floors that reflected overhead lights like a mirror. "Excuse me?" she said to a receptionist stationed at a sleek circular desk. "I'm here to meet Mrs. Hastings about a sewing position." Her voice sounded more confident than she felt. The receptionist, a young woman with neatly pinned hair, offered a professional smile. "Of course. May I have your name?" "Clara Suarez." A quick check of the computer and the receptionist nodded. "Yes, Mrs. Hastings is expecting you in the uniform and apparel department. Take the second bank of elevators to the 5th floor, then turn left." Clara followed the directions, each step echoing in her ears. The elevator ride was brief but tense, a few suited employees stepping in and out, eyeing her politely without speaking. Then the doors opened onto a bright hallway lined with large windows. A sign indicated that the uniform and apparel department was indeed to the left, near the office's tail end. She found it tucked behind a frosted door labeled Operations Uniform Division. Inside, the atmosphere was distinctly different, more casual, filled with racks of clothes, sewing machines, and boxes of fabric stacked along one wall. A few employees busied themselves measuring garments or organizing labeled bins. The smell of freshly pressed cloth mingled with the faint hum of machinery. At once, a petite woman with a pair of sharp eyes and gray-streaked hair pinned in a tidy bun approached. She wore a measuring tape slung around her neck like a craftsman's tool. Her gaze flitted over Clara, assessing but not unkind. "You must be Clara," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Mrs. Hastings." "Yes, nice to meet you," Clara replied, returning the handshake, mindful not to squeeze too hard. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." Mrs. Hastings nodded, then gestured for Clara to follow her to a corner where a small desk faced a row of mannequins. "So, Mr. Donovan told me a bit about your background. Some experience with sewing and repairs?" A wave of gratitude passed over Clara at Alexander's mention of her. "Yes, I've done quite a bit of sewing, mostly personal jobs and repairs for neighbors. I also worked part-time cleaning offices, but my main skill is stitching and alterations." Mrs. Hastings gave an appraising nod. "We manage all kinds of uniform pieces here. Shirts, blazers, promotional apparel, and sometimes specialty items for company events. We often need hands to do small fixes, replacing buttons, hemming pants, mending tiers. It's detail-oriented work, and efficiency matters." Clara bobbed her head, adrenaline spiking. "I'm comfortable with that. I also brought some of my own supplies." She patted the tote bag, hoping that would show preparedness. Mrs. Hastings glanced at the bag, then motioned to a workstation. "Let's do a quick demonstration. I have a stack of uniform blazers that need new buttons. One of our big conferences is next week, and the staff will wear matching attire. Think you can handle that?" Clara exhaled, relieved to have something concrete she could demonstrate. "Absolutely." She followed Mrs. Hastings to a table piled with navy blue blazers, each missing a button or two. The department manager handed her a small box of matching buttons and pointed out the brand new spool of navy thread. Without another word, Clara slipped her arms through the first blazer, finding the spot where the button should go, checking the alignment of the buttonhole. Then she pulled her kit from her tote and began to sew with practiced, precise movements. It felt oddly soothing, like she was back in her comfort zone, letting muscle memory guide her. She stitched quickly, ensuring the button was secure but not too tight so the blazer could fasten correctly. After finishing, she snipped the thread and flattened the blazer on the table, stepping back for Mrs. Hastings to inspect. "Neat stitching," the older woman murmured. "Let's see a few more." Clara nodded and continued, regaining her rhythm with each blazer. She mentally recalled the patterns her mother had taught her for reinforcing corners, for ensuring the thread knots remained hidden. By the third or fourth blazer, a small circle of onlookers formed, colleagues curious about the newcomer. "How's it going, miss?" asked a friendly-looking employee holding a stack of uniforms. "Need anything else?" Clara offered a polite smile. "No, I'm fine, thanks." Mrs. Hastings kept a keen eye on Clara's work. After a few minutes, she lifted one blazer, tested the newly attached button, and nodded in approval. "Nicely done. This is the standard we need." Clara's shoulders relaxed. "I'm glad," she said softly, unable to hide the relief in her voice. Mrs. Hastings motioned for her to set aside the blazers. "Why don't we talk in my office?" She led Clara to a modest room separated by glass panels, flipping on a small lamp that cast warm light over a desk strewn with fabric samples. Once they were seated, the older woman folded her hands. "I won't beat around the bush. This job isn't glamorous, but it's vital. We need someone who can handle up to 6 hours a day, at least 3 days a week, sometimes more during peak times. Pay isn't extravagant, but it's above minimum wage, with room for raises if you prove dependable." Clara's heart thumped with gratitude. 6 hours a day, 3 times a week. "I can manage that," she said. "I have a daughter, so the schedule matters. But I'm flexible." Mrs. Hastings arched a brow. "The schedule can fluctuate, especially around corporate events. Will that be an issue?" "I'll make it work," Clara answered firmly, She was determined to do whatever it took to secure this opportunity. "Good," Mrs. Hastings said, nodding. "We can start you on a trial basis, call it a probation period, to see how you fit with the team. If all goes well, we'll sign you on permanently." Clara's grin was immediate. "I'd be so grateful. I promise I won't disappoint you." Mrs. Hastings smiled back, her demeanor softening. "I trust Mr. Donovan's recommendation. He doesn't hand out personal referrals lightly, so I expect you'll do just fine." Hearing Alexander's name again made Clara think about how much she owed him already. She knew she couldn't let him down. "When do I start?" she asked. "How about Monday morning?" Mrs. Hastings glanced at her desk calendar. "That gives us a few days to get your paperwork in order." "Yes, Monday," Clara agreed eagerly. "Thank you so much." They hashed out a few more details. The paperwork she'd need, social security info, address, the direct deposit setup, and the basic employee handbook. Clara jotted notes, trying not to be overwhelmed. As they finished, Mrs. Hastings offered a handshake. "Welcome aboard, Clara. I look forward to working with you." "Thank you," she whispered, cheeks flushing with excitement. She left the office with a folder of documents pressed to her chest, feeling lightheaded. A job. A real job, doing something she excelled at, with hours flexible enough to take care of Sarah. She could hardly believe it. She made her way back down to the lobby, stepping outside into the midday sun. People scurried around her, brokers, lawyers, interns, each consumed with their tasks. But Clara felt like the city had paused just for her, giving her a victorious moment. She beamed at no one in particular, warmed by a sense of achievement and gratitude. Impulsively, she reached for the phone Alexander had given her, found his contact, and typed out a text. "Interview went well. I start Monday. Thank you so much." She hit send, hugging the phone briefly against her chest as she turned toward the bus stop. The city's cacophony wrapped around her, but inside she felt a quiet sense of joy. For the first time in ages, she was the one forging her path instead of just reacting to crisis after crisis. On the bus ride back, she caught herself planning how to break the news to Sarah. Maybe they'd celebrate by cooking something special. And she wondered about Alexander's reaction. He was a man of many commitments, yet he'd taken a personal interest in ensuring she found stability. Part of her wanted to see him face to face, to show him how grateful she truly was. Maybe that would happen tonight. Clara stepped off at her stop, looking up at the skyscraper that housed the penthouse. In all her life, she'd never envisioned herself living somewhere like that, if only temporarily. Yet every day in Alexander's orbit felt like a reminder that the world could be kinder, that second chances did exist. She took a deep breath, smiled at the doorman who recognized her, and went inside, clutching her folder of employment documents. Monday marked a new chapter, but so did today, because each step she took now was grounded not in fear, but in a growing sense of hope. Exhilaration bubbled in Clara's chest as she slipped into the penthouse that afternoon, balancing the folder of new hire paperwork under one arm. The doorman had given her a cheerful nod, clearly noticing her upbeat energy. In the elevator, her mind whirled with possibilities. Finally, she had a stable job lined up, and soon she could start saving money, maybe even find a modest apartment for her and Sarah. Little by little, she could rebuild her life. Inside, she found Sarah sprawled on the living room floor with crayons, carefully coloring in a large picture book. The little girl's face lit up the moment she saw her mother. "Mommy, did you get the job?" "Yes, sweetheart," Clara announced, practically beaming. "I start on Monday, isn't that great?" Sarah let out a squeal, bounding to her feet and throwing her arms around Clara's waist. "I knew you'd get it." Clara melted into her daughter's embrace, planting a kiss on her curls. "So did I," she teased, ruffling Sarah's hair. The relief pouring through her veins felt like a soothing balm, erasing days of anxiety in one swift moment. She looked around the penthouse, wondering if Alexander had returned yet. It was still early evening, so he could be stuck in traffic or finishing up a meeting. She glanced at the clock, then resolved to busy herself until he came back. Sarah handed her the crayons, and for a while they colored side by side, Sarah drawing princesses and castles, Clara doodling random shapes just to pass the time. Eventually, a quiet click at the door signaled Alexander's arrival. He stepped in, jacket draped over his arm. The tension in his posture relaxed when he saw them on the floor, crayons scattered around. Clara stood, brushing imaginary dust from her pants, and gave him a wide smile. "I got the job." His face brightened instantly. "That's excellent. Congratulations." He made a point of crouching to Sarah's level and holding out his hand for a high five, which she delivered with a giggle. Then he straightened up, attention returning to Clara. "I knew Mrs. Hastings would see you're exactly what they need." Clara felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you for recommending me. Really, Alexander, I can't thank you enough." He dismissed the gratitude with a small wave of his hand. "I'm just glad it worked out. You do all the work from here." His gaze flicked to the folder in her hand. "Got your paperwork?" "Yeah, I'll fill it out tonight," she replied, hugging it closer. "They need some documents, proof of address, references. I was hoping that since I'm in between addresses, well, your place might... I don't know if that's too forward." "Use my address," Alexander cut in gently. "This is your home for now, whatever you need to get started." That word, home, sent a pulse of warmth through Clara's chest. She offered a grateful nod, struggling to articulate how much it meant for him to say that. Before she could muster more words, Sarah piped up with an idea. "Can we celebrate, Mommy? Like, with something yummy?" Alexander chuckled at her eagerness. "Excellent suggestion," he said, ruffling Sarah's hair. "What do you say, Clara? Shall we go out for dinner?" Clara hesitated, scanning her borrowed slacks and blouse. "I'm not exactly dressed for a fancy place," she admitted, half laughing. She'd never dined in an upscale restaurant before. Alexander's expression softened. "Then we'll pick somewhere that doesn't require formal attire. How about a cozy family restaurant I know? They have the best homemade pasta." Sarah clapped her hands. "Pasta? Yes, yes!" The excitement in her daughter's voice was enough to quell any of Clara's reservations. She nodded. "All right, let's do it." Soon they were riding in Alexander's car through streets ablaze with late afternoon light. Clara kept glancing out the window, still somewhat amazed that this was her life now, sitting beside Alexander Donovan on the way to celebrate her new job, with Sarah dozing happily in the back seat. They arrived at a small, family-owned Italian restaurant nestled between tall office buildings. The neon sign above the entrance flickered warmly, and inside the aroma of garlic and fresh bread enveloped them. A jovial hostess seated them in a corner booth with red and white checkered tablecloths. Clara instinctively scanned the menu for prices, and though everything looked moderate, she still felt a twinge of guilt letting Alexander pay. But he seemed entirely at ease, asking for the wine list, joking with Sarah about which pizza toppings were superior. Dinner commenced amid the gentle hum of conversation and the soft clink of cutlery. Alexander ordered a simple margarita pizza for Sarah, along with fresh breadsticks, while Clara chose a plate of fettuccine alfredo. Alexander himself went with a hearty lasagna. As they waited, he turned to Clara, his eyes lit with curiosity. "So, what do you envision for yourself now that you have this job? Any big goals?" She toyed with the edge of her napkin. "I'd like to save up enough to rent an apartment for me and Sarah, somewhere safe, with decent schools. Eventually, maybe I could expand my sewing into a small business, though that might be too ambitious." "Not at all," he countered. "Ambition is good. If you ever need advice on starting something like that, let me know. I happen to know a thing or two about launching businesses." Clara laughed, appreciating his gentle humor. It still baffled her how seamlessly he integrated support into their conversations. He neither patronized her nor dismissed her dreams. He just supported her. Sarah, meanwhile, drummed her small fingers on the table, humming a tune as she gazed around the restaurant. "I like it here," she declared loudly. "We never ate at a restaurant like this before, Mommy." Clara squeezed her daughter's hand. "We haven't, sweetheart. But hopefully we will again soon." Their food arrived, steaming dishes of pasta, gooey cheese on the pizza. Alexander dug in with enthusiasm, praising the chef to Sarah's amusement. Clara took her first bite and practically moaned at the rich, creamy sauce. Eating a meal she hadn't had to budget for or scrape together from leftover groceries felt almost surreal. She pushed away a hint of guilt, telling herself it was okay to accept this gift. She'd pay it forward somehow. Between bites, Alexander asked Sarah about her day, what she'd colored, whether she liked reading, if she had any favorite stuffed animals. Sarah chatted away, describing a plush kitten she'd seen in a store window and how she dreamed of becoming an artist one day. Clara watched them interact, heart stirring at how genuine Alexander seemed with her daughter. So many men, like her father, couldn't be bothered to spare a kind word. But Alexander listened intently, responding as if Sarah's aspirations were as valid as any corporate pitch. Halfway through the meal, Clara's phone buzzed. She frowned, fishing it from her purse. The number on the screen was unknown but local. With a quick glance at Alexander, she excused herself and answered. "Hello?" "Clara, it's me." A gruff voice came through. She froze, recognizing it instantly. Her father. "Been trying to track you down. Heard you're staying with some rich guy? Is that true?" Her heart pounded. It had been days since he'd kicked her out, and not once had he called to check on Sarah. Now he was calling as if he had some right. She swallowed, stepping away from the table to find a quieter corner near the restaurant's entrance. "How did you get this number?" "You left that old phone behind. Some neighbor gave me the new one," he replied, sounding annoyed. "Anyway, just wanted to make sure you aren't making a fool of yourself. That man will take advantage of you, you know. Nothing's free. I tried to tell you." Clara bristled. "He's helped me more in a week than you have in years," she said, voice trembling with anger. "And Sarah's doing fine. Why are you even calling?" A pause. I found a couple of Sarah's toys you left behind," he offered awkwardly. "Figured she might want them." Her mind whirled. Was this some sort of half-hearted apology? She glanced back at the booth where Alexander and Sarah were sharing a moment of laughter. Could she trust her father now after the cruelty he'd shown? "If you want to send them, you can leave them at the place I used to work," she finally managed, giving him the simplest instruction she could. "They'll get them to me." He huffed. "Fine. And, Clara?" His tone shifted, almost remorseful. "Look, I wasn't sure what else to do. Times are tough. You were another mouth to feed. I was desperate." She closed her eyes, tears threatening. This was hardly the apology she longed for, but maybe it was the best he could do. "I understand you were desperate," she said quietly, "but you threw your daughter and granddaughter out in the cold." The memory of that day still stung fiercely. "Anyway, thanks for thinking of Sarah's toys." She ended the call before he could say more, pressing a trembling hand to her forehead. The restaurant's warmth contrasted sharply with the cold anger swirling inside her. She inhaled deeply, then returned to the table, forcing a smile for Sarah's sake. Alexander's eyes flicked over her face questioningly. "Everything okay?" he asked under his breath. She gave a small nod, not wanting to bring negativity into this sweet celebration. "Yeah, just an unexpected call." She reached for her fork, though her appetite had waned. She reminded herself she was safe now, that she had a future and a job. But her father's words, "Nothing's free," echoed, trying to sow doubt. Instead of letting them fester, Clara took a fortifying breath. Alexander had shown nothing but respect. She needed to trust her own instincts over the poison her father had spewed for so long. She squeezed Sarah's shoulder gently, then forced a genuine smile. Let's finish our food, okay? They spent the remainder of dinner savoring the meal and talking about what kind of uniform clothing tasks Clara might do at work. Slowly, she let the tension ease from her muscles, focusing on the closeness of Alexander and Sarah. By the time they left, the sky had turned to a deep navy speckled with city lights. Sarah's pizza box with leftovers clutched in her small hands. In the car ride back, Sarah dozed again, lulled by the comfortable warmth and full belly. Clara thanked Alexander for dinner, but he only shook his head with a soft grin. "You're the one who worked for this outcome, Clara. I just happened to have a car and a good appetite." She laughed quietly, relaxing into her seat. Outside, skyscrapers glowed. For a moment, she pictured the future, her sewing job, perhaps renting a modest apartment, building a life for Sarah. Maybe building something meaningful for herself, too. And though she couldn't be certain, she sensed that Alexander in some capacity might remain part of their story. For now, that was enough. They arrived at the penthouse, the doorman greeting them politely, and went upstairs. Clara put a sleepy Sarah to bed and then stood in the living room, the hush of night surrounding them. She turned to Alexander, who lingered near the window, gazing at the cityscape. "Thank you," she repeated, stepping closer. "I know you keep saying it's no big deal, but it is. To me, at least." He turned, meeting her eyes, and for a moment, the air felt charged with unspoken empathy. "You don't owe me anything," he said gently. "I'm just glad to see you both happy and safe." She nodded, letting the sincerity of his words wash over her. "Good night, Alexander." "Good night, Clara." Retreating to the guest room, she prepared for bed, carefully placing her new employee documents on the bedside table. Then she looked at Sarah, fast asleep, a soft smile on her lips as if dreaming of bright, joyful things. Clara hoped that in this new chapter, her daughter's dreams would always be safe. Curling up beneath the blankets, Clara let her mind drift to the memory of the phone call, her father's cynical voice. But overshadowing it was Alexander's calm reassurance and the sweet echoes of their shared laughter at dinner. One voice was old and bitter, the other was new, offering hope. And as Clara drifted to sleep, she resolved to follow the hopeful one, no matter how unfamiliar it felt. Sunlight filtered through the penthouse windows in gold-tinted rays, stirring Clara awake on Saturday morning. She blinked at the pastel walls of the guest room, momentarily forgetting the swirl of emotions from the night before. Then she remembered her father's sudden phone call, his harsh insistence that nothing came free. A heaviness pressed on her chest, but she shook it off. This was a new day, and Monday marked the start of a job she'd worked hard to secure. Across the bed, Sarah stirred, pushing the blankets aside. The little girl sat up and yawned, her hair sticking out in wild curls. "Mommy, can we have pancakes?" she asked, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Clara smiled. "Sure, if I can figure out where all the ingredients are," she joked. "Let's go see if we can find what we need in Mr. Donovan's kitchen." They tiptoed into the hallway. The penthouse was hushed, suggesting Alexander was either still asleep or already out for a morning errand. The thought of him sleeping in felt somehow humanizing. He wasn't just the always busy CEO. Maybe like her, he savored slow mornings when he had the chance. In the kitchen, Clara rummaged through cupboards until she found flour, sugar, and other pancake essentials. She worked quickly. Sarah perched on a stool to help by handing over each new ingredient. Soon, the batter was ready, and the first pancake sizzled on the hot griddle. While flipping pancakes, Clara mulled over the chores she could tackle to repay Alexander's hospitality. She'd already tidied the living room. Perhaps she'd wash the linens or reorganize the fridge. Practical gestures, sure, but better than simply lazing around. She wasn't about to confirm her father's bitter world view by appearing ungrateful or idle. Then footsteps padded into the kitchen. Clara turned to see Alexander in sweatpants and a plain t-shirt, hair slightly tousled. He looked more relaxed than usual, a hint of surprised delight crossing his features as he inhaled the aroma of freshly made breakfast. "You're cooking pancakes," he observed with a lopsided smile. "I thought I smelled something good." Clara felt her cheeks flush. "I hope that's okay. Sarah requested them. I figured we'd share if you'd like some." He chuckled. "Absolutely. I'm never one to turn down homemade pancakes." He moved closer, gently placing a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Good morning, kiddo. Did you sleep well?" Sarah nodded, a bright grin on her face. "Yes, I had a dream about unicorns." Alexander's expression softened. "Sounds magical." Then he glanced at Clara, noticing her anxious energy as she hovered over the stove. "Need any help?" "No, I've got it," she replied, flipping another pancake onto a plate. "But if you don't mind showing me where the maple syrup is, that'd be great." He rummaged in a cabinet until he found a bottle of syrup. Before long, they were gathered around the kitchen island, devouring fluffy stacks of pancakes. Syrup dripped down the sides, and Sarah clapped her hands in excitement each time she took a big bite. Clara felt the tension in her shoulders ease. She stole a few looks at Alexander, taking in how he laughed at Sarah's silly remarks. It was comfortable, this small slice of domestic routine. "So," Alexander began, cutting into his stack, "any plans for the weekend, Clara? We've got a couple of days before you start work. Thought maybe you'd want some time to rest or to explore the city a bit?" She hesitated. "I was thinking of doing some laundry, maybe tidying up. I'm not really used to having weekends off." She let out a wry chuckle. "I've been hustling for so long, I'm not sure how to relax." Alexander leaned forward, elbows on the island. "I get it. But you deserve a break. And Sarah deserves a little fun, too. There's a park not far from here. Great for kids. Could be nice to get some fresh air." Sarah perked up at the word park. She tugged on Clara's sleeve. "Mommy, can we go? Please?" Clara's smile was immediate, but she threw Alexander a cautious glance. "I don't want to impose on your Saturday plans. You must have your own things to do." He shrugged. "I have a few calls to make this morning, but nothing major until Monday. I'd love to join you both, if that's all right. We can grab lunch afterward." Warmth spread through Clara's chest. Part of her felt guilty accepting so much from him, but the other part whispered it was okay to let people in sometimes. "That sounds nice," she said. "If you're sure you have time." He nodded, a steady confidence in his eyes. "I'm sure." They finished breakfast amid chatty conversation, Sarah humming about playground slides, Alexander describing the giant oak trees at the park. Afterward, while Sarah retreated to gather crayons for the outing, Clara began clearing dishes. Alexander moved to help, but she gently waved him off. "At least let me do the cleanup this morning," she insisted. "You provided the groceries, and anyway, you said you had calls to make." He hesitated, then smiled in concession. "All right, if you insist. I'll get changed and handle some work calls, then we'll head out." After tidying the kitchen, Clara found herself in the bedroom, sifting through the small selection of clothes the personal shopper had chosen. She picked a comfortable pair of jeans and a breezy blouse. It felt both surreal and thrilling to have new, well-fitted clothes. A memory stirred, her father's biting remark about handouts. She squared her shoulders against that echo, determined to build the confidence to stand on her own feet, with or without approval from the man who'd cast her aside. Sarah wore a bright t-shirt decorated with cartoon characters, running around excitedly as they prepared to leave. Alexander, now dressed in casual slacks and a light sweater, met them in the foyer. "Ready?" The ride to the park took only 15 minutes. The place bustled with families, kids chasing after balls or giggling on the swings. Dogs bounded on leashes, tongues lolling in the mild sunshine. A faint breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and distant grilled hot dogs. Clara inhaled deeply, savoring the sense of normalcy she'd almost forgotten. She and Sarah wandered to the playground area, Sarah squealing at the colorful slides. Alexander trailed behind, hands in his pockets, a content half-smile on his lips. As soon as Sarah spotted the swings, she dashed toward them, calling for her mother to push her. Clara obliged, helping Sarah onto a swing and gently pushing, each arc of motion accompanied by Sarah's excited giggles. Meanwhile, Alexander stood close, occasionally stepping in to steady the swing when it got too high. Clara appreciated the calm care he showed, not overshadowing her role but quietly supportive. After a while, Sarah hopped off to run around the other equipment. Clara and Alexander leaned against the metal fence separating the playground from the walking trail. For a moment, they observed other families, parents scolding rambunctious toddlers, siblings bickering, couples strolling hand in hand. "It's nice to see Sarah enjoying herself," Alexander said quietly. "I imagine she hasn't had many chances to just play like this lately." Clara nodded, watching her daughter skip toward a slide. "You're right. Our last few months have been rough. I was doing odd jobs, never sure if I'd pay for groceries or rent on time. I guess she missed out on a lot of simple joys." Her eyes turned soft. "That's what hurts the most. I never wanted her to feel deprived." Alexander's voice was gentle. "I know, but you're changing that now." She glanced at him, touched by how he seemed to understand her worries without judgment. "I hope so. I want her to have a stable life, a real childhood. That's why this job means so much. Even if it's just sewing uniforms, it feels like a big step forward." He nodded, crossing his arms. "I'll admit, when I first started my company, I had a single goal in mind, to escape poverty. But once I reached success, I realized there were bigger things at stake: community, giving back, making everyday life better for families like the one I grew up in. And when I saw you and Sarah that night, it reminded me of my own past." Clara bit her lip. "That's what drives you then? Your memory of being that little boy with parents struggling?" He released a breath. "Exactly. Sometimes I still see that boy in my reflection, you know? Money and success don't erase old insecurities overnight, but it does give me the power to help others." His gaze lingered on Sarah, who was now chatting animatedly with another child. "And I can't stand the thought of any kid being left out in the cold like that." Silence lapped at them for a few heartbeats. Clara processed his confession, her heart swelling with empathy. "Thank you for telling me," she managed softly. "I always felt alone in my experiences. But hearing your story, it makes me realize we're not so different." Alexander studied her face. "No, we're not." Just then, Sarah bounded back, holding a small dandelion she'd plucked from the grass. "Mommy, look what I found!" She thrust the yellow flower toward Clara, then glanced up at Alexander. "You can have one too, Mr. Alex, if I find another." He grinned. "I'd be honored." She took off again, scanning the grass for more dandelions. Clara and Alexander shared a warm look, an unspoken understanding passing between them. They strolled casually after Sarah, stepping along a paved path that circled the park. A few times passers-by noticed Alexander. Some nodded in recognition, though no one disturbed them. Clara guessed that in his domain he was well known, but perhaps this casual environment offered them some privacy. After a while, the three of them ventured to a small vendor cart selling ice cream and soft drinks. Alexander bought them cones, chocolate for Sarah, vanilla for Clara, and strawberry for himself. They found a bench under a sprawling oak tree and sat down, content with a sweet treat in the midday sun. Sarah chatted about random topics, her old stuffed animals, the pictures she planned to draw tomorrow, how she wanted to name every squirrel she saw. Clara soaked in her child's happiness, grateful that, at least for now, their struggles felt distant. Eventually, as the sun climbed higher, they decided to leave. "I have a couple more calls to make this afternoon," Alexander mentioned, carefully discarding the ice cream wrappers in a trash can. "But if you and Sarah want to do something else, the driver can drop you somewhere." Clara glanced at her daughter, whose energy was waning. I think we'll just head back to the penthouse. Maybe we'll watch a movie or something low-key." She gestured to Sarah, who fought a yawn. She's had enough excitement for one morning. They all piled back into the car. On the ride home, Sarah dozed off again, lulled by fresh air and a happy stomach. As the city streets whizzed by, Clara found herself stealing quiet glances at Alexander. A swirl of affection and gratitude threatened to overwhelm her. She wasn't naive. She understood that, in many ways, they belonged to separate worlds. Yet he consistently showed up, never making her feel like a burden. When they reached the penthouse, Clara gently woke Sarah, and the three of them went upstairs. Alexander took a brief call in the foyer, then excused himself to his private office. Clara settled Sarah on the couch with a cartoon, her mind abuzz with mixed emotions. She couldn't deny that part of her heart felt drawn to Alexander in a way beyond mere gratitude. His kindness, warmth, and the hidden vulnerabilities he'd shared. She found herself wanting to know more, to linger in his presence. But she pushed the thought aside, telling herself not to complicate matters. She still had so much to figure out: a new job, a stable home, a better future for Sarah. She owed Alexander a debt of thanks, not romantic entanglement, if he even felt anything like that. But no, she chastised herself. He was a busy CEO who probably had a line of sophisticated women vying for his attention. She was just a single mom who happened to cross his path. "Focus on what's real," she whispered to herself, watching Sarah giggle at a cartoon bunny on the screen. "He's your friend, your benefactor. Don't ruin it with silly notions." Yet even as she told herself those words, her heart gave a wistful flutter. She stood there for a moment, letting the swirl of conflicting feelings settle. Then she grabbed the folder from the coffee table and decided to finish her paperwork for Monday. Work, her best shot at independence, was all she needed to concentrate on. She would let her father's cynicism burn itself out, prove her mothering capability, and accept Alexander's generosity without illusions. But somewhere deep inside, she couldn't help the tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, a genuine bond was forming between them. Something that went beyond mere rescue. For now, though, she kept that spark hidden, content to let it glow in the quiet corners of her heart while she braced herself for the next day's responsibilities. Because in a world that had once seemed so bleak, the promise of friendship, stability, and the faintest possibility of love felt like the best gift she could ever receive. Sunday dawned with soft, muted light. Clara stretched in bed, mindful not to wake Sarah, who lay curled under the blankets, her little face peaceful. Memories of the park floated in Clara's mind: Sarah's laughter on the swings, Alexander's gentle smiles. It all felt almost too good to be real. But the faint ache in Clara's chest reminded her that life's burdens didn't vanish overnight. Monday's start date loomed, and with it, the promise of a new routine. She rose quietly, tiptoeing out of the guest room. In the hallway, she paused upon hearing distant piano music. Strange. She hadn't known Alexander owned a piano. Curiosity piqued, she followed the sound to a room on the penthouse's far side, a space she hadn't explored yet. The door was partly ajar. Inside, sunlight slanted across a baby grand piano, its glossy surface gleaming. And there, seated at the bench with his back to the door, was Alexander, dressed in casual clothes. His fingers moved over the keys with surprising fluidity, coaxing a gentle, contemplative melody that resonated with a mixture of longing and hope. Clara froze in the doorway, captivated. She never would have pegged Alexander as someone who played, let alone played so beautifully. The music was soft, almost hesitant, as though he were exploring old chords he'd once memorized. Something about it made her heart constrict. She realized she was intruding, but she couldn't bring herself to turn away. Halfway through a phrase, Alexander faltered, pausing as though sensing her presence. He turned, surprise crossing his face. "Oh, good morning," he said, removing his hands from the keys. I didn't realize anyone was awake. Clara stepped forward, feeling a little self-conscious. I heard the music. It was lovely. She offered a small smile. I didn't know you played. He shrugged lightly, standing from the bench. I don't play often. It was something I learned as a kid, then dropped for a long time. Lately, though, I've been trying to recapture a bit of it. Helps me think. She nodded, understanding. It sounded, well, it was very beautiful, like it held feelings you couldn't put into words. A faint color touched his cheeks, and he gestured for her to come in. It's just an old piece I started writing back in my teens. Never quite finished it. Part of me still wants to. He trailed off, looking almost shy, a stark contrast to the commanding CEO persona he typically wore in public. Clara took a cautious step into the room, her eyes drifting over shelves lined with music books. Some were heavily marked with notes, others brand new. She could almost envision a younger Alexander, leaning over them with the same focused determination he now reserved for business deals. Well, she said gently, maybe you can finish it one day. You've accomplished so much else. He met her gaze, something unspoken in his eyes. Maybe, he allowed, then cleared his throat as if casting off vulnerability. How'd you sleep? Pretty well, she replied, hugging her arms. Thank you for letting us stay here again. I promise, once I start getting paid, I'll look for an apartment. I don't want to— You're not imposing, he interrupted softly. Stay as long as you need. Really. He hesitated. Plus, if Sarah's comfortable, there's no rush. Clara felt warmth flood her chest, a mixture of gratitude and a growing fondness she tried hard to contain. You're too kind. She let out a small laugh, glancing at the silent piano. Anyway, I won't keep you from practicing. I just wanted to see who was playing. I was finishing up, he said, closing the piano lid gently. I have some reading to do before Monday, but the rest of the day is free. If you and Sarah want to do something, let me know. She nodded, stepping back toward the door. Sure, I think we'll have a quiet morning, maybe read or color. I need to fill out a bit more of that new hire paperwork. Then maybe we'll fix lunch. Sound good? He smiled, the corner of his eyes crinkling. That sounds very good. I'll join you both later. With that, they parted ways, Clara heading back down the corridor to check on Sarah while Alexander lingered in the music room, his posture thoughtful. Clara's heart remained a fluttering thing in her chest, torn between admiration for him and the caution hammered into her by years of struggle. Mid-morning found Clara and Sarah snuggled on the living room sofa, a stack of library books at their side. The library had been Alexander's suggestion. He'd arranged for a driver to take them earlier in the week, wanting Sarah to have a wealth of reading material. Now, Sarah flipped through a story about a magic garden, occasionally pausing to ask her mother about a difficult word. Meanwhile, Clara kept an eye on the time, planning to cook a simple lunch, chicken and rice maybe. She wondered if Alexander would want to eat with them or if he'd be consumed by some last-minute phone conference. The question answered itself when he emerged from his office around noon, stretching his arms as though he'd been seated too long. "Hey," he greeted, spotting them on the couch. "I was thinking we might go for a walk before lunch, get a little air, unless you had other plans." Clara glanced at Sarah, who had perked up at the mention of an outing. "A short walk would be nice," she said. "I was going to cook in about an hour. Is that okay?" "Perfect," he agreed. "We can walk around the block, see if any street vendors are out, maybe pick up some fresh fruit for dessert." Sarah leapt off the couch, all eagerness. Clara hurried to grab keys and her phone. Despite the Sunday calm, the city still bustled with life. Families out for brunch, couples strolling with coffee cups, joggers weaving through the crowds. The sky overhead was a bright, unclouded blue, hinting at a warm afternoon. As they walked, Alexander inquired gently about Clara's father, whether she'd heard from him again. She shook her head. "No, just that one call. He said he'd drop off some of Sarah's old toys at my previous workplace. I don't know if he actually will." Alexander nodded, sliding his hands into his pockets. "If he does, we can retrieve them any time. No rush." "Yeah." Clara felt a pang. She couldn't shake the bitterness of her father's dismissal, but she also couldn't ignore the faint flicker of guilt in her chest. He was still her parent, after all, yet she'd protect Sarah's happiness above any misguided sense of loyalty. "I'm just focusing on Monday," she said aloud, eyes on the sidewalk. "I really want this job to go well." He offered a reassuring smile. "It will. Mrs. Hastings is tough but fair, and you're talented. Just keep doing what you do." They paused at a corner fruit stand where bright peaches and plums sparkled with droplets of water. Sarah marveled at their colors. Alexander purchased a small bag of peaches, handing one to Sarah to hold. "We'll cut these up after lunch," he said. On the way back, Clara found herself opening up about her mother, the woman who had first taught her to sew. "She passed when I was 12, Clara explained quietly. "But I remember so clearly how she taught me the basics, threading a needle, knotting thread, patching holes. It all felt like magic back then." Alexander's expression reflected sympathy. "You were close to her?" Clara nodded, trying to keep emotion from cracking her voice. "Very. She was the gentlest soul. When she died, my father changed. He grew distant, colder. I guess he never truly healed, but that doesn't excuse how he treated me." Alexander slowed his pace, letting Sarah skip ahead a few steps. "You've carried a lot on your shoulders," he noted softly. "But you're still standing. Stronger, even." She couldn't deny the truth in that. "Thanks," she managed, meeting his gaze momentarily. That flicker of connection passed between them again, warm and steady, before Sarah called out, pointing to a shop window displaying colorful scarves. She pressed her face to the glass, entranced by the swirling patterns. "You like those scarves?" Clara asked, ushering her daughter away gently so they weren't smudging the glass. Sarah nodded, and a half-hour later, they'd entered the shop to admire the fabrics. Clara recognized fine silk, embroidered edges, and realized how much she missed working with truly beautiful textiles, not just uniform repairs. One day, she told herself, maybe she could design her own. A small dream, but a precious one. They returned to the penthouse, hunger nudging them all. Clara set about cooking the chicken dish while Alexander helped Sarah wash the peaches. The domestic bustle felt surprisingly seamless. She could hear low laughter from the sink as Alexander teased Sarah about water splashing everywhere. Soon they gathered at the dining table. Clara served plates of fragrant chicken and rice, garnished with parsley. Sarah practically bounced in her chair. "Mommy, this looks so good!" she exclaimed. Alexander concurred, taking a bite and praising her cooking yet again. Halfway through the meal, the phone rang. A landline, distinctive in the penthouse's hush. Alexander glanced at Clara, then rose to answer. His end of the conversation was terse, a business-like tone returning. "Yes, I understand. No, push the meeting to Tuesday morning. I'll handle the rest." When he returned to the table, his brow furrowed. "Sorry about that. A scheduling issue at the office." Clara nodded, though she felt a pang, guessing that, come Monday, Alexander's world would intensify once more. Meetings, negotiations, philanthropic events, he'd be drawn back into his busy orbit. And she would start her new job. Their paths, while connected, might not cross as easily in the day-to-day frenzy. Strangely, the thought left her a bit melancholy, but she forced a smile and continued eating, focusing on Sarah's chatter. After the meal, Alexander retreated to handle more calls, leaving mother and daughter to clean up. Clara, wanting to keep her hands busy, also decided to do some extra laundry. She found the linen closet well stocked with towels and sheets. Might as well wash them and tidy them up. Sarah helped by folding smaller items, though her help mostly consisted of giggles and lopsided piles. Clara patted her daughter's head, instructing her gently on how to fold corners. As they worked, she heard the faint murmur of Alexander's voice behind a closed door. Business talk, no doubt. She paused, reflecting on how quickly she'd adapted to this environment. A week ago, she'd been homeless, drifting from shelter to shelter. Now she was tidying sheets in a penthouse. The surrealness wasn't lost on her. But her new reality, as unusual as it was, felt stable, even comforting. She prayed it wouldn't slip away. That evening, Alexander emerged from his calls, looking spent. Clara offered him a freshly folded towel. An odd gesture, but it felt symbolic of the day's domestic routine. He smiled in gratitude, glancing around. "You've done a lot today, you must be tired." She shrugged lightly, stepping aside so he could place the towel in the linen closet. "It's nothing. I like to keep busy." A thoughtful look crossed his face. "Clara, I want you to know something. Even if you hadn't cleaned or cooked, I'd still want you and Sarah here. You don't have to earn your place through chores." She swallowed, touched by his words. "I know," she answered softly, "but it's how I show thanks." He nodded, understanding shining in his eyes. "Then I'm grateful. For everything." They lingered a moment in the hallway's dim light, standing close. Clara felt the quiet hush of the apartment settle around them, broken only by Sarah's distant humming from the living room. She dared to meet Alexander's gaze, sensing again that subtle spark between them. Neither spoke, but it was as though each recognized the other's significance. Two people from different worlds, brought together by compassion and chance. Finally, Alexander stepped back, clearing his throat. "I'll see if Sarah needs anything," he murmured, voice a bit hoarse. Clara nodded, her heart thudding, warmth pooling in her chest. She watched him walk away, then exhaled slowly. Perhaps she wasn't alone in her growing feelings, but she reminded herself of her father's cynical warnings. She had to protect her heart, ensure she didn't mistake kindness for something more. Still, in the hush of that hallway, she couldn't deny an undercurrent of possibility. As night descended, they found their routines again. Dinner was leftovers, followed by a short kids' movie for Sarah before bedtime. Clara read her daughter a story as Alexander wrapped up a final phone call. When the penthouse finally settled into its nighttime silence, Clara gazed at the city lights outside her window. Her life was on the cusp of a new chapter. Tomorrow she'd start her job, building the future she and Sarah deserved. But as she drifted off to sleep, the memory of Alexander's gentle piano music floated in her mind, along with the unspoken understanding she'd felt in his presence. She wondered if love, something she'd once dismissed as an idle fantasy, could blossom under these extraordinary circumstances. And for the first time in a long while, the thought didn't scare her. It filled her with a cautious, hopeful excitement for whatever the next day might bring. Monday arrived with the soft glow of dawn creeping through the penthouse windows. Clara stirred before the alarm, heart fluttering at the day's promise. Today she would begin her new job, her first real step toward independence after so many weeks of uncertainty. Sliding from under the covers, she checked on Sarah, who slept soundly, and then padded to the kitchen to make coffee. She needed a moment to calm her nerves. As the coffee machine sputtered, she mentally rehearsed everything. Find Mrs. Hastings, confirm her schedule, jump into the uniform repairs. She thought of the office building's polished halls and busy environment. Excitement warred with anxiety in her chest, but she was determined to do well, for both her and Sarah's sakes. When the coffee was done, she poured a small cup and sipped carefully, letting the warmth steady her. She glanced at her phone. Alexander had left a text saying he'd be in meetings most of the morning but wished her luck on her first day. A small smile curled her lips. His support felt like a safety net, a reminder she wasn't stepping into this new world alone. By the time Sarah woke, Clara had laid out her own clothes, a crisp blouse with comfortable slacks, and was ready to prepare breakfast. She made scrambled eggs and toast, urging Sarah to eat quickly because the morning wouldn't slow down for them. Sarah, though yawning, was excited to see her mother so determined. "You'll be the best sewer ever, Mommy," she declared through a mouthful of egg, making Clara chuckle. At 7:30, Clara double-checked her bag. Needle kit, extra thread, a small snack. She had decided to take the bus again. She liked the sense of normalcy it gave her. Plus, it would help her learn the route for future trips. She kissed Sarah goodbye, leaving her daughter with one of Alexander's staffers who sometimes filled in as a babysitter. Although it pricked Clara's pride to rely on someone else, she reminded herself that for now it was a temporary arrangement until she could arrange more stable childcare. Exiting the penthouse, she felt a familiar swirl of emotions at seeing the busy city below. The air carried a crispness that promised a mild day. On the street, she boarded the bus, finding it half full of drowsy commuters. Her reflection in the window reminded her of how far she'd come, from that desperate night in the rain to a poised woman on her way to her new job. Upon reaching the company's lobby, she was greeted by the same courteous receptionist as before. This time, there was no hesitation. Clara knew exactly which elevator to take. She arrived at the uniform and apparel department, where the hum of sewing machines was already in full swing. Several employees bustled about, sorting piles of garments, pinning name tags, measuring new hires for uniforms. It was a hub of efficient chaos. Mrs. Hastings spotted her at once. "Clara, glad you're here. Let's get you started." They settled into a quick orientation, signing official paperwork, reviewing safety protocols, obtaining a temporary badge. Then Mrs. Hastings guided her to a workstation near the windows, 2 machines, a small table, a well-lit lamp. On the wall hung racks of navy blue blazers, stacks of folded shirts, and boxes of replacement buttons and patches. A sense of familiarity soothed Clara's nerves. "We have a rush order this week for the national conference," Mrs. Hastings explained, rifling through a clipboard. "We need every blazer to have the new corporate patch sewn on the left sleeve, about 200 pieces in total. Might sound daunting, but we've got a team of 3 other stitchers. You'll each take a portion." Clara took a breath, setting her tote down. "I'm ready," she said, rolling her shoulders. "Just show me where to begin." Mrs. Hastings smiled. "That's the spirit. Let's do a quick demonstration." They walked over to a large table. Mrs. Hastings pulled out the new patch, a sleek design featuring the company's updated logo. She demonstrated the exact placement on the sleeve, aligning the patch so it was perfectly centered 2 inches below the shoulder seam. Clara watched carefully, memorizing each detail. When it was her turn, she threaded the sewing machine with matching thread, pinned the patch and tested her stitches on a scrap of fabric before attempting the real piece. The first blazer took a few minutes as she made sure everything was lined up. She double-checked the final result, proud that her lines were neat and even. Mrs. Hastings nodded approval and left her to it. Falling into a steady rhythm, Clara lost track of time. She pinned, sewed, snipped threads, set blazers aside, then reached for the next one. The repetitive nature of the task felt soothing. Her mind was free to wander. Thoughts of Sarah popped up, quickly followed by images of Alexander playing the piano or guiding Sarah through the park. Heat rose to her cheeks as she realized how often he now featured in her daydreams. She tried to refocus on the sewing, determined not to let personal feelings derail her first day. By mid-morning, she'd completed nearly a dozen patches when a co-worker sidled up to her table, a woman in her 30s with a wide grin. "You're the new hire, right? I'm Janet. Welcome aboard." Clara smiled back, pausing her machine. "Nice to meet you, Janet. I'm Clara." Janet eyed her work. "Wow, neat stitching. Gotta say, we can always use more skilled hands here. Sometimes the deadlines are brutal." Clara nodded, lifting the next blazer. "I'm ready for it." Janet lowered her voice conspiratorially. "I hear you're friends with Mr. Donovan himself. That's gotta be something. He rarely gets involved in day-to-day hires." Clara stiffened slightly, recalling how word had already spread last time about her connection to Alexander. "He just recommended me. I'm grateful, but I'm here to do my job like everyone else." Janet's grin softened. "Don't worry, I'm not implying anything. Everyone here respects Mr. Donovan's philanthropic side, so they're curious, but once they see how good you are, they'll understand you earned your spot." Relief trickled through Clara. "Thank you. I appreciate that." Janet patted her shoulder and moved on, leaving Clara to exhale. She realized that in a company so large, gossip was inevitable, but as long as she performed well, no one could question her worth. So she kept sewing, letting the hum of the machine lull her into a steady workflow. By lunchtime, Clara had completed nearly 20 patches, a respectable pace for her first day. Mrs. Hastings encouraged her to take a break, so she decided to explore the company cafeteria. Navigating the corridors, she felt slightly out of place amid employees rushing around with laptops and files. Some recognized her from Alexander's presence, but she kept her gaze forward, determined not to overthink it. In the cafeteria, she bought a simple sandwich and fruit juice, then found a quiet table. She was halfway through her meal when a cheerful voice broke her solitude. "Mind if I sit?" Looking up, she recognized Lily, Alexander's assistant. Clara offered a warm smile. "Of course not, please." Lily settled opposite her, carrying a salad. "So, how's your first day going? I heard you were assigned to the conference patches. Rough start, huh?" Clara laughed softly. "It's a lot, but I'm managing. I don't mind the repetition." "That's good to hear. Mrs. Hastings can be demanding, but she's fair." They chatted casually, Lily explaining how she juggled scheduling for Alexander and a handful of other executives, Clara sharing her own background in sewing. When the topic inevitably turned to her living arrangements at the penthouse, Clara tried to maintain composure. "How is that, by the way?" Lily asked gently, likely sensing the sensitivity. "Being in his space must be different." "It is," Clara admitted, "but it's temporary until I can save enough to rent a place for me and my daughter. He's been incredibly generous." Lily's eyes held genuine warmth. "He cares about you too, you know. In all my years working for him, I've rarely seen him invest so personally in someone's well-being." A flush climbed Clara's cheeks. "I owe him more than I can say. Still, I want to stand on my own. I can't rely on his kindness forever." Lily nodded approvingly. "I respect that, and if you ever need help navigating the company or city resources, let me know. I'm good at logistics." Occupational hazard. Clara felt a spark of gratitude. It was a relief to have an ally in Lily, especially amid whispers and curiosity. "Thank you. I might take you up on that." They finished lunch chatting about innocuous topics, each returning to their duties with a renewed sense of camaraderie. Clara found herself smiling as she walked back to her sewing station. This environment, though hectic, could become a place where she thrived. The afternoon was a blur of more patches. By 3 o'clock, Clara's wrists ached, but she'd completed 35 blazers. That number filled her with quiet pride, especially when Mrs. Hastings passed by to check her progress and offered a satisfied nod. Others in the department introduced themselves. Ron, a quiet man who specialized in embroidery, Patricia, a middle-aged seamstress who'd been at the company for years. Each was curious but polite, and Clara realized she might even make friends here. Shortly before quitting time, her phone buzzed. She glanced down to see a text from Alexander. "How's your first day going?" Clara's cheeks curved into a grin. She typed back quickly, "Busy but good. Sewing conference patches. Tiring, but I like it." Almost immediately he responded, "Fantastic. Proud of you. Don't work too hard." Her smile widened. "Proud of you." The words warmed her, boosting her morale for the final stretch. When the clock hit 5 p.m., Mrs. Hastings dismissed everyone for the day. Clara shut down her machine, gathered her things, and stepped into the elevator with a sense of real accomplishment. Emerging into the crisp evening air outside the building, she took a moment to breathe in the sense of success that came from honest work. For the first time in weeks, she felt truly alive, like she had a role, a purpose, and the ability to shape her future. Her father's derisive comments felt like a distant echo. She was forging her own path now. The bus ride back gave her time to plan out dinner. Maybe she'd try a new recipe, something to celebrate the day. She also wanted to hear about Sarah's afternoon, whether she had fun, if she asked about her mother. In the back of her mind, Clara allowed herself the faint hope that Alexander would be home in time to share a meal, too. When she finally arrived at the penthouse, the doorman greeted her with a friendly nod, and she rode the elevator up, gripping her tote. Stepping inside, she found Sarah drawing at the kitchen island, the babysitter washing a dish in the sink. The child perked up instantly at the sight of her mother. "Mommy, how was your job?" Sarah exclaimed, bounding over. Clara laughed, scooping her daughter into a hug. "It was good, sweetie. I sewed a bunch of patches. I think I'll be really happy there." Sarah's smile was pure sunshine. "I knew you'd do great. Did Mr. Alex see you today?" "No, he's busy," Clara said, setting her bag down. "But we texted. He was happy to hear I liked it." At that moment, a soft voice called from the hallway. "Yes, I was." Alexander appeared, having just arrived himself. His tie was loosened and he looked tired but pleased. "Glad you made it home safe." Clara's heart gave a little leap. "I didn't think you'd be back so soon." He shrugged, crossing the living room in a few long strides. "Meetings wrapped earlier than expected. Wanted to see how your day went." His eyes flicked to her in earnest concern. "So, good first day?" She nodded, warmth flooding her voice. "Yes, really good. Thank you for everything." He gave a small smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I didn't do much. You did it on your own." The babysitter discreetly slipped out, leaving them a sense of privacy. Clara guided Sarah to set aside her drawing, then turned to Alexander. "Would you like some dinner? I can whip something up." "That'd be perfect," he answered. "Long day for me, too. A home-cooked meal sounds better than takeout." He ruffled Sarah's hair with a fond expression. "You want to help?" Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "Can I mix stuff?" Clara smiled at her daughter's excitement, then looked at Alexander, her gratitude shining through. "We'll make something delicious," she promised. While Sarah washed her hands, Clara searched the fridge for ingredients, maybe a quick stir-fry with veggies and chicken plus rice. Nothing fancy, but comforting enough to celebrate her first successful workday. As she began to chop vegetables, Alexander rolled up his sleeves, stepping up beside her to help. Their arms occasionally brushed, sending a small electric flutter through her. She ignored it, focusing on the sound of the knife against the cutting board. Soon, the kitchen hummed with quiet synergy. Sarah stirring sauce in a small pot, Alexander tidying the countertop, Clara sautéing chicken in a pan. The aroma of garlic and onions filled the penthouse, stirring an even deeper sense of home. When they finally sat down to eat, the setting sun cast orange and pink hues across the city skyline outside the windows. Conversation flowed, Sarah insisting on recounting her entire afternoon cartoon session, Alexander sharing a snippet about a philanthropic project, Clara relaying details of how the uniform patches were done. It felt seamlessly natural, as though they'd been doing this for years. Halfway through the meal, Clara stopped to take in the moment. A warm meal, her daughter's laughter, Alexander's relaxed grin. She remembered her father's cynicism, that no one offered help without a catch. Yet here she was, experiencing kindness without conditions, forging a path forward. Part of her wondered if she was unwittingly stepping into deeper emotional territory with Alexander, but she decided not to analyze it too much, at least not tonight. One day of work down, many more to go. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more uniform repairs, fresh tasks. But for tonight, She would savor the simple success of having provided for herself, a day's honest labor, and return to a place that, while still borrowed, radiated acceptance and warmth. As she tucked Sarah into bed later, the little girl asked in a sleepy mumble, "Mommy, are we happy now?" Clara brushed back Sarah's curls, leaning in to kiss her forehead. "Yes, darling," she whispered. "We are." And though the road ahead remained uncertain, she felt certain of at least one thing. She had found a genuine chance to build a better life, one that went beyond mere survival, into a space where hope could flourish. A gentle breeze rustled through the open window of the penthouse, carrying with it the sense of the bustling city below. Clara stood at the kitchen counter one early morning a few weeks later, stirring a cup of tea. Life had settled into a steady rhythm. Each day she traveled to the uniform department, immersed herself in sewing tasks, and learned new skills from her co-workers. Evenings were filled with Sarah's lively chatter, simple dinners, and occasional moments of quiet conversation with Alexander, whose schedule remained hectic but never so busy that he ignored the two people now sharing his home. She glanced at the clock on the wall, realizing she had a bit more time than usual. Her shift started an hour later today due to a department meeting. Sarah was still asleep, so Clara took the rare moment of silence to reflect. The new job had grown more comfortable. She'd mastered the art of quick repairs and patch placements, and Mrs. Hastings often praised her consistent work. 2 weeks into the role, Clara had even received her first small paycheck, a physical reminder that she was no longer powerless. Yet as her official payday passed, she felt a subtle restlessness. The money she'd earned wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to remind her she could begin laying plans for her own apartment. While she cherished Alexander's hospitality, living in his penthouse indefinitely brought lingering doubts. Chief among them, her father's cynical warning that kindness always demanded a price. Her father's voice haunted her sometimes. She shook her head, unwilling to let him define her decisions. She'd seen nothing in Alexander that suggested an ulterior motive. Still, independence had been her dream for years, and she didn't want to simply drift in another person's orbit forever. A soft creak from the hallway signaled footsteps. Alexander appeared, tie hanging loose around his neck. He caught her gaze and offered a subdued smile. "You're up early." "Could say the same for you," Clara teased gently, returning the smile. "Meeting?" He nodded, filling a glass of water at the sink. "I'm heading to the foundation offices. We're planning a new outreach program, and it's taking shape faster than expected." He sipped, leaning against the counter. "Any big orders at the department today?" She shrugged, swirling her tea. "A decent workload, but nothing I can't handle. We're rotating between patch orders and small repairs for the staff. Janet said we might also get into promotional t-shirt designs next week." Alexander's eyes lit with interest. "Designs, huh? Sounds like a step up from simple repairs." "Yeah." She felt a flicker of pride. "Mrs. Hastings hinted I might help draft some patterns. It's not a full design position, but it's something." He reached out, gently tapping her wrist. "I'm glad you're getting recognized, Clara. You've got a knack for all this." Her heart gave a small flutter at the warmth in his voice. She pulled her wrist away, careful to mask her deepening affection. "Thanks," she murmured. "I owe a lot of it to you." He frowned slightly. "Stop that. I only opened a door. You walked through." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the hum of early traffic drifting through the open window. For a split second, Clara wondered if she should mention her apartment hunting thoughts. Part of her yearned to discuss it with him, to see his reaction. But the fear of seeming ungrateful made her hesitate. She opted for caution, letting the moment pass. Sarah trotted in, hair a tangle of sleepy curls. "Good morning," the child chirped. Both adults turned to greet her, and Clara smiled, relieved by the sweet distraction. After a quick breakfast, they parted ways. Alexander to his foundation meeting, Clara to the bus stop with Sarah in tow. She'd drop her daughter off at school first, as she'd recently managed to enroll Sarah in a good public kindergarten near the office, thanks to Lily's help. Late that afternoon, Clara was carefully hemming a set of uniform pants when she heard her phone buzz. She discreetly checked it, expecting some question from Lily or maybe a note from the babysitter. Instead, an unknown number flashed across the screen. Her heart clenched. Another call from her father? With a wary glance at Mrs. Hastings, who was busy organizing a rack of blazers, Clara excused herself and walked to a quieter corner of the department. She pressed the phone to her ear, breath tight. Hello? It wasn't her father. An unfamiliar woman's voice spoke politely, stating that she was the manager of a local apartment complex. Clara's pulse raced as she listened. She'd left her name on a waiting list for one of their modest two-bedroom units weeks ago, hoping for a vacancy in a safe neighborhood. Apparently, one had just opened up. If she could provide pay stubs and a deposit within the next few days, the place was hers. Clara's chest flooded with excitement, quickly followed by a swirl of nerves. A deposit? She had some money saved after these few weeks of work, but was it enough? She'd need to check her bank balance, maybe see if she could borrow a little. The monthly rent was fairly priced and the area had decent schools. "I'll figure it out," she told the manager, asking for more details. They agreed to meet on Saturday for an official tour. She ended the call feeling a strange mix of triumph and dread. Independence had never been closer. She was grateful beyond words to Alexander for his kindness, but she'd told herself from the start that living off his generosity wasn't a permanent solution. Now the promise of her own space was tangible, a chance to stand on her own 2 feet. So why did her heart feel weighed down by sadness at the thought of leaving? Returning to her sewing station, she tried to refocus. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. At quitting time, Janet waved goodbye and Clara managed a friendly smile, tucking her phone into her bag. She needed to think about finances, how to break the news to Alexander, how to make Sarah feel secure. This was a step forward, she reminded herself, the next logical move for a mother determined to provide stability. On the bus ride home, she fiddled with her phone, checking her bank app. She had enough for the deposit, barely. And if she continued working, the monthly rent would be tight, but doable. She'd need to budget carefully for groceries, childcare, and other bills. A surge of determination flared. She could do this. She reached the penthouse, relieved to find it empty, except for the babysitter helping Sarah with homework at the kitchen table. Clara thanked the sitter and then sat down with Sarah. "Hey, sweetie, guess what?" she began, keeping her voice upbeat. "I found a place we might live, just you and me." Sarah's eyes widened. "A new house? Really?" "Yes," Clara affirmed gently. "An apartment. We can have our own bedrooms, decorate the walls how we like. Would you like that?" Sarah pondered for a moment. "Will Mr. Alex come too?" Clara's heart squeezed. "No, honey. It would be just us. Mr. Alex has his own home." "Oh," Sarah said, looking down at her crayons. After a second, she brightened. "But we can still visit him, right?" Clara forced a smile. "I'm sure we can." The weight of her daughter's question pressed heavily on her mind. She wanted to ensure Sarah wouldn't feel torn or confused by the shift. She also wanted to respect Alexander's boundaries. He'd done so much for them. If they stayed, though, would that become an unspoken arrangement that complicated both her independence and her budding feelings for him? An hour later, while preparing dinner, she heard the door open. Alexander stepped in, carrying a briefcase and looking exhausted but calm. He greeted Sarah, ruffled her hair, and shot Clara a subdued smile. She braced herself, deciding to test the waters. If she was serious about the apartment, he deserved to know. "Alexander," she began once Sarah scampered off to draw in the living room. "There's something I need to tell you." He set his briefcase by the sofa, turning to her with a hint of apprehension. "Everything okay?" Clara took a breath. "I got a call from an apartment manager. One of the places on my waiting list opened up. I'm going to see it on Saturday." His expression flickered. Surprise, then something like regret. "Oh," he said softly. That's great. Congratulations." She nodded, fiddling with her fingers. "I just want you to know how grateful I am. Your home has been a godsend, but I feel like it's time I stand on my own. That was always the plan, right?" He hesitated, glancing away. "Right. Yes, of course." He mustered a smile, though it looked a bit forced. "I'm happy for you, Clara, truly. You deserve a place to call your own." A pang of sadness rippled in her chest. "I hope this doesn't seem like I'm running off. You've been nothing but wonderful to us." He swallowed, exhaling slowly. "I understand. And I think you'll do great. I guess I just didn't realize how soon it would happen. But that's my own fault for not asking about your plans." Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to reassure him, to explain that her feelings for him were real, whatever they might be, and that this move wasn't to distance herself from him emotionally. But how could she say that without complicating everything? "Thank you," she whispered. "You've helped me see what's possible." He nodded, the space between them thick with unspoken sentiments. "If you need any financial backing to secure the deposit, I'm here. No pressure, just an offer." Her gut twisted, touched by his unrelenting generosity. "I think I can handle it," she said. "But thank you." They drifted into dinner preparation more quietly than usual. Alexander asked Sarah about her day, but his eyes occasionally darted to Clara, a thoughtful tension beneath his calm exterior. She sensed he was grappling with complex emotions, relief that she was progressing, sadness that she might leave, and perhaps the same swirl of half-realized longing she felt. In the days that followed, Clara prepared her finances, visited the apartment, and confirmed it was livable. Simple, but clean, with enough space for Sarah's bed and a corner for her sewing machine. As she handed over the deposit check, she felt a rush of pride. This was what she'd fought for, real independence, a stable environment for her daughter. Yet each time she imagined moving out of Alexander's penthouse, her heart gave a soft ache. Sarah, too, seemed torn, happy about a new house, yet worried about leaving behind the familiarity of her routines with Alexander. Finally, the moving date arrived, a Saturday morning. Clara hadn't purchased much beyond the basics, so she only needed a handful of boxes. Alexander insisted on providing a car to transport them. Lily appeared that morning, offering to help. Clara felt overwhelmed by gratitude, uncertain how to repay everyone's kindness. Alexander himself helped carry boxes, quietly placing them in the trunk. His face remained kindly neutral, though she caught glimpses of wistful expression whenever Sarah hugged him. They reached the apartment complex and climbed 2 flights of stairs to the unit. Plain walls, a modest living area, a small kitchen, but to Clara it glowed with possibility. She stood in the empty living room, boxes scattered around her, while Alexander set down the last load. "Well," he said, wiping his forehead, "it's a good space." She nodded, resting a hand on a box. "Yes, it is." The emptiness of the room magnified every sound, Sarah's footsteps echoing as she ran to check out her bedroom. Clara stared at the floor, unsure how to say goodbye. "Alexander," she began. He paused, heart in his eyes. "Yes?" She swallowed the lump in her throat. "I don't know if words can do it justice, but thank you. You saved us. I was desperate, and you took us in without a second thought. You gave me more than just a roof. You gave me hope." His gaze softened, and he nodded, struggling to maintain composure. "You deserved every bit of help, Clara, and you'll always have my support if you need it. Don't forget that." Stepping forward, she impulsively wrapped her arms around him, a gentle hug that brimmed with gratitude and something else she couldn't quite name. He hesitated only a heartbeat before hugging her back, warmth radiating between them. Sarah's voice broke the moment. "Mommy, come see my room." They separated, managing small smiles. Alexander ran a hand through his hair. "You should see what she's up to," he said quietly. "I'll let you two settle in." She nodded. He picked up his keys, heading toward the door. For a split second, he glanced back, as if weighing whether to say more. Then he nodded once in farewell and slipped out. The door clicked behind him, leaving Clara in her new home, heart pounding with a mosaic of emotions: triumph for her independence, sadness at his departure, and a deep, unspoken affection she wasn't sure how to resolve. Fighting tears, she forced a bright smile for Sarah, rushing into the child's new room to admire the bare walls and the sunlight streaming through a lone window. "It's ours, baby," she said, ruffling her daughter's hair. "We made it. We have a home." Sarah beamed, twirling in a circle. "We can invite Mr. Alex over to see, right?" Clara swallowed, her vision blurring at the edges. She glanced around the empty space, imagining Alexander standing here, a kind presence bridging the gap between his world and hers. "Yes," she finally said, steadying her voice. "We can invite him any time." And though the path ahead remained full of unknowns, her relationship with Alexander, the slow climb toward true security, Clara felt certain this was the next step she needed to take. She had proven to herself that she could shape a future for her daughter, built on honest work, resilience, and a belief in second chances. For now, that was enough. Tomorrow might bring deeper truths, or perhaps a blossoming love neither she nor Alexander had dared to fully name. But as she stood with Sarah, surrounded by the echoing emptiness of new beginnings, Clara felt an unshakable conviction. Wherever life led them next, hope would guide the way. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.